I'm your host, Ella, and I have a special guest here. Your name is?
Hi, I'm Allie Watkins.
Today we have a very specific topic, childhood trauma and empathy. Specifically, how does childhood trauma affect your empathy skills as an adult? Last week's podcast episode is going to be very hard to beat. If you missed it, go check it out. I had experts Stepman and Greg talking with me last week over a very fun topic. So go check it out if you have time. Sorry for that little self-promotion, but onto the podcast, of course. Allie, do you want to start us off?
I'm going to start off with one question for you, Ella. What got you interested in this topic for today's episode of the podcast?
So I recently got invited to join a leadership group here in Norman throughout United Way, and we recently met with about 15 nonprofit agencies around Norman who specialize in different things, of course. Some focus on school care, some focus on health, but most of them focus on children with childhood trauma and how to take care of that, of course. I was so surprised by these results and I wanted to learn more, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to share my thoughts.
Wow, that's a lot of agencies. How does childhood trauma impact the future of those who have experienced past trauma?
Many people with childhood trauma can develop mental disorders and anxiety, depression, PTSD, which can lead along to mental health issues along with the physical health issues.
I didn't know that. Are there any positives to their futures?
Yeah, so it can also lead to post-traumatic growth, and that is growth in personality traits, attitudes, and things such as compassion and empathy, of course. So there are positives, but mostly people can tend to focus on the negatives.
Are there any studies that show elevated empathy levels in people with past trauma?
So I looked into a couple articles with studies included, specifically this one from Plus One, where it specifically focused on that topic. Included in this article are studies that show adults who have experienced childhood trauma have elevated empathy levels. And they also did the experiment on adults who haven't experienced childhood trauma. They gave them this article and this survey on different experiences and how they would handle it. And the results ended up being the adults who had past trauma ended up being more empathetic. And many places do these experiments, and most of them came out with the same results as this one. And another thing I want to discuss is empathy fatigue.
What is that?
Empathy fatigue is the ability for a person to stop caring, feeling numb, and disconnected from the environment around them. It can also include many physical symptoms like headache, difficulty sleeping, nausea, and more along those lines. Trauma, stress, and anxiety can have a major role in empathy fatigue. On some occasions, this is what induces the empathy fatigue.
So overall, how do we answer the first question?
So the answer to the first question is childhood trauma can affect your empathy skills as an adult positively and can give you the ability to feel for others, but it can also have negatives. And that is the overall answer to our question we had today. And I want to thank Allie for being here, of course.
Thank you for having me on the Empathella podcast.
And that is the end of today's episode. I'll see you next Tuesday for another episode on Empathella's podcast. Bye.